Today we're looking at the Student Bible, NIV Student Bible. Now, this is an older edition. This is a hardback from, I believe, the 90s. It's updated, and so what you see on the shelf if you go to a bookstore now will look more like this. It's published by Zondervan, and it's available in the NIV translation. The contributors to this are Tim Stafford and Philip Yancey. Their perspective would be broadly evangelical if you had to define it. It's available in hardback, in leather, in duotone. I think that's it. I'm not sure if large print or not. It's 1,408 pages. In the back, just before you get to the maps, there are about 8 blank pages for notes, so you can take your own. The aim of the Student Bible is stated to just get people reading the Bible. That's their main goal. So there are 3 reading plan tracks that walk you through Scripture in a couple of different ways. There's track 1, which gives you kind of a broad overview of key biblical passages, and that's a 2-week reading plan. Then track 2 is a little more in depth. It's a 6-month reading plan that takes you through at least 1 chapter of every book of the Bible. And then track 3 is for people who want to read all of the Bible. It's about a 3-year reading plan that takes you through every word. This is a double column Bible, and the notes are all in these little shaded sections in the text. There's not any bottom notes. There's no center column reference, cross-reference, or anything like that. There are a few of these character profiles throughout the text of different key biblical individuals, but for the most part, that's it. After the reading plans at the beginning of the Bible, there's about a 4-page overview of the books of the Bible. Very short, very succinct, just telling you this is what this book's about, this is what this book's about, this is what this book's about. And then each book has its own book introduction as well. Now, I mentioned these character profile overviews. There's about 100 of these sprinkled throughout the Bible, and each one actually has this thing called life questions after each profile. So each personality profile tells you about this biblical character, and then there are like life questions. So for instance, after doing a short profile on the prophet Nathan, and telling you a little bit about him and his role in Scripture, it says, life questions. Who helps you in your conscience? Who can you count on to tell you the unpleasant truth about yourself? So kind of like applying something that we learn about Nathan to our own life today. That can be a pretty interesting exercise. Most of the supplemental material, aside from the little insights in the text or profiles of different persons, comes at the back of the study Bible. And there's this section called Where to Find It. It starts with the list of all of the profiles, 100 people you should know and where you can go for their profile. Then it gives a glossary of the different names of individuals or figures, not biblical figures, but historical figures or literary figures that are mentioned in the notes throughout the text. So everything from Alcatraz to John Calvin to G.K. Chesterton, there's a little entry saying, hey, this is who we were referencing when we talked about that in the note. After that, we come to well-known biblical events. So it kind of walks you through the events of the Bible and where you can find them. That's helpful, especially for new readers who don't know exactly where a certain famous Bible story is when they're trying to find it. And then they have lists of the parables and the teachings and the miracles of Jesus all laid out. So if you remember a story about Jesus, but you don't know exactly where it is, this is a quick, easy way to find it. And there's a list of notable Psalms. Now, Psalms are tricky because they're just numbered. There aren't titles to the Psalms in most Bibles. So this gives you Psalms thematically that are well known, like when you're in trouble, or when you're in despair, or when you want to know about God's goodness, or when Jesus cried out from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? Where was that again? It gives you that, and I think that's pretty helpful, especially for new readers. There's also a presentation of the kings of Israel and Judah, which can get really confusing when you're reading through the historical books and the prophets in the Old Testament. So that's helpful that they're in parallel timeline. So you've got Israel's kings, you've got Judah's kings, and who overlapped with who, and which prophet, and where you can find their stories in Scripture. After that, we come to a subject guide. So if you're looking for what does the Bible say about adultery, or ambition, blasphemy, creation, or war, or the will of God, this gives you verses or passages or notes that they put that speak to those things. It's not exhaustive, but it'll point you in the right direction. It's a good starting point to get you into those passages. Now, in terms of study notes for Genesis, they're pretty sparse, honestly. There's not much that focuses on the questions that people have about the concepts or the events in Genesis people wonder about. So you're not going to get a lot about creation, evolution, young earth, old earth, framework theory, any of that kind of stuff. The approach is much more broad, I would say more surface level. It's a lot of, well, however God did it, and here's what's important is that we come to know the God who did it. That kind of stuff. When we get to Exodus, there's really not much one way or the other on the historical questions surrounding the Exodus event, on the location of Mount Sinai, on the crossing of the Red Sea, the route of the Exodus. There is a note that talks about the significance of the 10 plagues and how they were most likely aimed at a specific god in the Egyptian pantheon. But there's not much that's said. It's like gives you a glimpse, but then doesn't give you much more. It also makes note of the fact that the counting of the Israelites in the book of Numbers and also in Exodus, the numbers used may or may not be literal numbers. And that is an issue in Old Testament interpretation. How many Israelites came out of Egypt and entered into Canaan? Was it upwards of 2 million? Or was it 20,000 or somewhere in between? Scholars are divided on that. Evangelical scholars are divided on that. And so there is a brief mention of that in the Numbers passage on page 163. When we come to Romans, there's really not much emphasis or discussion at all on Romans 7, on whether Paul was speaking of himself or whether he was adopting the persona of someone outside of Christ. The notes kind of take it for granted that he's just talking about himself, and they present it as Paul struggling with sin. But they take the approach that in chapter 7, Paul is struggling with sin in his own power. And in chapter 8, is what it looks like when you actually follow the Spirit and walk in the Spirit. So it's kind of a hybrid view between the traditional Augustinian view and the Eastern, more Orthodox view in terms of Romans chapter 7, but not a lot. You'd kind of have to know that debate to really get that from the text. The notes, again, are very personal focused. How does this apply to you? What do you do with this? There really aren't any notes on Romans 9 through 11 and the question of who is all Israel and salvation, predestination, election, Jacob I've loved, Esau I've hated. All those interpretive questions that then unfold in different theologies, they pretty much are entirely glossed over. When we come to Revelation, there's very, very brief mention of different ways of reading the book, and there are brief notes about things like the millennium and where Christians disagree with one another, but not very much. They just tell you basically there are divisions, Christians differ, and in spite of that, here's how you should read Revelation symbolically. They're heavy on getting the readers to take in the symbols of Revelation, but they're very light on telling the reader what those symbols actually signify. So would I recommend the student Bible? Honestly, not really. It's not like it's a bad Bible. It's aimed primarily at high school and college students, although there's probably some late middle schoolers, 7th and 8th grade, would probably read it as well. And it's not bad or wrong or heretical. It's just not much. There's really just not a lot to it. What is there is good, but if you're buying a study Bible, there are better study Bibles out there, honestly. You're just not getting a lot. I don't know. I mean, it's not bad. It's not bad, but it's just meh. I definitely wouldn't make it your go-to study Bible or your primary study Bible. It has more notes than a text-only Bible, obviously, but not as many as a study Bible should have. So it kind of skirts the line. You get what you pay for, I guess. What do you think, though? Those are just my thoughts. Have you used it? Is this the Bible you grew up with in your youth group or in your high school or college ministry? What do you think? Share it in the comments below. If you like this video and you want us to continue, then please like and subscribe and share it with other Bible nerds out there. If you have not checked out our free course, Bible for the Rest of Us, I'm going to put a link right there. The course is entirely free. We walk you through all kinds of issues having to do with Bible interpretation, Bible translations, inspiration, understanding the overview, the big picture, all the way down to specific passages. We get into a lot, and it's entirely free. So check it out. Click the link. Download the free workbook. You can do it as an individual. You can do it as a group, small group, Sunday school class, student ministry. It's all free. All the resources of Disciple Dojo are free. And if you want us to continue being able to make them available for free, we would love for you to become a monthly Disciple Dojo donor. You can click on this link right here, and there will be more information on how you can support this ministry. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time here at Disciple Dojo when we look at other study Bibles that are out there on the market.